My name is Amanda Lewis. For 10 years, I believed that my worth was measured in loyalty, in the quiet, steady work of building something meant to last. I was a senior project manager at Viron Logistics, a company headquartered in the steel and glass heart of a city that hummed with ambition. My world was one of supply chains and route optimization, a complex, elegant dance of ensuring that things from life-saving medicines to fresh produce arrived where they needed to be, when they needed to be there. I loved the precision of it, the satisfaction of solving a puzzle that spanned continents. I thought my dedication, my deep institutional knowledge, was an asset, a vital part of the company's foundation. I learned just how fragile that foundation was during a client dinner at a restaurant with white tablecloths and hushed, reverent lighting. The breadsticks were still warm when my boss, Connor Maddox, leaned back in his chair, a self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He clinked his wine glass with a spoon, a gesture so performatively grand it made my stomach clench. "Before we all get too deep into the company's expense account," he began, his voice booming with false bonhomie, "I want to share some news." The table, filled with important clients, junior analysts, and even the new intern who used corporate buzzwords like punctuation, turned toward him, their faces a mixture of curiosity and polite deference. "I've had to make a tough call," he continued, his grin widening. "We're letting Amanda go, effective immediately." A profound, echoing silence fell over the table. A fork clattered against a plate. Someone near me drew in a sharp, audible breath. Connor didn't even glance in my direction. He gestured vaguely with his hand, as if shooing away a fly. "It's just not working out. We need agile thinkers, innovators, not whatever this is." He let the words hang in the air, a public indictment. "Incompetent," he added, the word landing with the force of a physical blow. "She's been dragging us down." He said it all with the casual, transactional air of a man ordering another bottle of wine. I sat there, my fork frozen midair, not breathing, not blinking. I had not been fired in a boardroom after a thoughtful review. I had not been let go in a quiet, private meeting. I had been publicly executed, my career and dignity served up as an appetizer for a table of stunned onlookers. Humiliation, I discovered in that moment, has a distinct taste. It tastes like warm goat cheese, the metallic tang of an over-oaked Pinot Noir, and the sharp, burning acid of your own stomach turning in on itself. If you've ever felt that kind of sudden, gut-wrenching shock, that feeling of the floor giving way beneath you, do me a small kindness and hit the subscribe button. 95% of people who find these stories listen without clicking, but every single subscriber helps me continue to share them. It would be a gesture of support I didn't receive that night. My mind was a snowstorm of white noise. My ears burned. The only thing louder than the frantic thumping of my own heart was the echo of that word, incompetent, looping in my head like a cruel mantra. A waitress, oblivious, approached with a dessert menu, her smile faltering as she sensed the sudden, glacial chill in the air. Someone from the accounting department, a kind woman named Maria, mouthed the words, "Are you okay?" I managed a small, jerky nod, a lie my body told without my permission. I placed my napkin on the table, the linen suddenly feeling heavy and suffocating, and I stood up. I didn't know what to do, where to go. All I knew was that I had to move before I shattered. That's when a voice, quiet and steady as still water, cut through the haze. "Excuse me." I turned. A man I didn't recognize was standing near our table. He was impeccably dressed in a steel gray suit, and he carried himself with a calm, commanding presence that seemed to quiet the air around him. There was an intelligence in his eyes, a watchfulness that felt both unnerving and intriguing. "I saw your presentation," he said, his voice low and direct. 2 years ago. The Logistics Optimization Summit in Chicago. You designed the RouteNet prototype, didn't you?" I could only stare, mute and uncomprehending. He pulled a simple, elegant business card from his jacket pocket and slid it across the white tablecloth. It moved with a quiet, deliberate grace. "Grant Wakefield," he said. "Be in my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. The name registered with a jolt. Wakefield Capital. The legendary investment firm. The man whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear in financial circles. Connor, meanwhile, had already moved on, laughing loudly at a joke one of the clients had made, as if I had already dematerialized, a ghost at a feast I was no longer invited to. I picked up the card. It felt solid and real in my trembling hand, an anchor in the swirling chaos of my humiliation. I walked out of that restaurant, my mascara likely streaked, my heart in pieces, but my spine, somehow, still straight. I had no idea what awaited me the next morning, but I knew, with a certainty that cut through the pain, that it would not be a quiet exit. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark of my living room, Grant Wakefield's business card resting on the coffee table like a strange, impossible artifact. My phone was a constant, painful buzz of notifications. Sympathetic text messages from coworkers, some genuine, some obligatory. Vague, chirpy emails from recruiters on LinkedIn who had somehow already caught the scent of blood in the water. Hi Amanda, I know that big changes can often lead to even bigger opportunities. It all felt like noise, a distant storm I couldn't yet process. At 8:45 a.m., I stood before the gleaming glass and steel monolith that was the Wakefield Capitol building. The lobby was a cathedral of minimalist design, all polished marble and hushed reverence. It smelled faintly of sandalwood and success. I had worn my best blazer, a simple, dark blue sheath that felt like armor, and had pulled my hair back into a severe knot, a small attempt to project a control I did not feel. A serene receptionist guided me to his office. It wasn't a space designed to intimidate with flashy art or trophies. It was a scholar's room, lined with books, furnished with worn leather armchairs, and dominated by a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a godlike view of the city below. Grant didn't stand or offer to shake my hand. He simply gestured to the chair across from his expansive, uncluttered desk. I have a low tolerance for wasted time, he began, his voice as calm and direct as it had been the night before. At that summit, you didn't waste a second of mine. You had something real. I wanted to correct him. Had, I thought. Past tense. A concept shelved and forgotten, dismissed by a man who measured innovation by the number of buzzwords in a PowerPoint slide. But he continued, opening a slim folder on his desk. To my astonishment, it contained printouts of my RouteNet presentation. My architecture diagrams, even a photograph of a hand-sketched flowchart I had drawn on a whiteboard, a coffee stain blooming in the bottom right corner. The RouteNet prototype, he said, tapping a diagram with his pen. Real-time load balancing for multi-temperature freight, an elegant predictive heat mapping algorithm, asynchronous logic. It was 5 years ahead of its time. I found my voice. Connor shelved it, I said, the words tasting like rust. He said it was too internal-facing to generate marketable buzz. A faint, mirthless smile touched Grant's lips. Of course he did. He closed the folder. I want you to build it, Amanda. Not the compromised, watered-down version. The real one. The one you envisioned. You'll work in stealth mode. My capital, your vision. I stared at him, the offer so audacious, so surreal, it felt like a dream. Why? I asked. Why now? Because, he said, leaning forward slightly, his gaze intense, your former company is a bloated, inefficient relic. It's surviving on venture capital fumes and marketing lies. The entire logistics industry is desperate for intelligent, transparent infrastructure that actually works. You can either stand by and watch Viron collapse under the weight of its own incompetence, or you can be the reason it does. A short, sharp laugh escaped me. It wasn't a laugh of humor, but of sheer, unadulterated shock. One night, I was being fired over dinner. The next, I was being offered the chance to build a revolution. What's the catch? I asked, my voice skeptical. The catch is absolute discretion, he said. You will disappear, professionally. A comprehensive NDA, burner accounts, a dummy LLC. No press, no public profiles, no digital footprint. We build this in the shadows. We let the results speak for themselves. I thought of Connor's smug face, of the years of my work he had casually dismissed or co-opted as his own. I thought of the feeling of being called deadweight in a room full of my peers. What if I'm not ready for this? I whispered, the question a genuine flicker of fear. Grant tilted his head, his expression unreadable. You didn't walk into this building to ask me that. He was right. I hadn't. I didn't say yes in that moment. But as I walked out of that silent, powerful office, clutching an onboarding packet so thick it felt like a novel, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about resurrection. It was about reclaiming the work, the vision, and the voice that had been silenced for too long. It was time to build something real. The process of becoming a ghost was meticulous and swift. The onboarding at Wakefield Capital took an entire day and involved more legal documents than I had ever seen in my life. I signed NDAs that felt like vows of silence, my signature binding me to a future of professional anonymity. The dummy LLC they created for me was called Orion Shelf Works, a name so bland and forgettable it was a form of camouflage. My new office was a single, windowless room in a nondescript co-working space on a quiet side street, a place with no signage and an air of quiet transience. My old life was packed away. My Viron laptop, with its years of work and memories, sat in a desk drawer at home, its battery removed, like a relic from a past life. The work I was doing now existed on a completely air-gapped system, routed through a series of encrypted servers that made me feel like a character in a spy novel. The first thing I did was unearth my original notebooks. I spread the old, dog-eared pages across my new, empty desk and began to sketch out the true architecture of RouteNet. The version I had dreamed of was modular, self-healing, and used predictive analytics to anticipate disruptions before they happened. Most logistic systems were reactive. I wanted to build one that was intuitive, almost alive. I couldn't do it alone, but I couldn't post a job opening on LinkedIn. So I reached into the past. I made quiet calls to the ghosts of Viron, the brilliant minds Connor had cast aside. My first call was to Priya, a genius coder who Connor had pushed out, claiming her code was too complex for agile scalability. Her real crime had been quietly pointing out a fundamental flaw in one of his pet projects. Priya didn't need much convincing. "Do you have full creative control?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Then I'm in." Next was Gabe, my former head of quality assurance. He had taken the fall for a catastrophic system crash that had actually been caused by Connor's refusal to approve a critical security patch, a decision made to save a few $1,000s. Gabe was wary. "If this is just about getting even, Amanda, I'm not interested." "This isn't about getting even, Gabe," I told him. "This is about getting it right." There was a pause. "Send me the project outline." Finally, I reached out to Rosie, a DevOps prodigy who had been let go after a minor project delay that was entirely a vendor's fault. I found her freelancing from a small town in the mountains of Vermont. She asked only one question: do I get to build the entire infrastructure from the ground up, with no legacy baggage? From scratch, I promised. "Thank God," she said. "I'm in." We became a small, clandestine team of exiles. We were funded by Wakefield's seemingly bottomless accounts and motivated by a shared sense of purpose. We communicated through encrypted channels, using aliases, our digital footprints erased. We were not just building a software platform, we were meticulously crafting a counter-narrative to the one that had discarded us. We were building proof. At night, I would lie awake, the city lights painting patterns on my ceiling, my mind racing with algorithms and data models. A quiet joy, one I hadn't felt in years, began to bloom in my chest. One night, watching our prototype flawlessly simulate a cross-country shipment of temperature-sensitive pharmaceuticals, rerouting in real time to avoid a weather front and still arriving 3 hours ahead of schedule, I actually smiled. There was no applause, no corporate recognition. But for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like a footnote in someone else's story. I felt like the author of my own. The first sign that our silent work was having an effect was not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet crack in the foundation of the old world. It came in a 2:17 a.m. message from Rosie on our secure channel. "We have our first convert." She forwarded me an email chain. A mid-sized trucking company out of Ohio, Midline Transit, a partner I had personally on board at Viron years ago, had just terminated their contract. The official reason was vague, citing a shift in strategic priorities. But the final paragraph was a quiet declaration of independence. "We have opted to pilot a more agile and transparent logistics solution that offers superior real-time chain of custody reporting, better aligning with our internal risk management protocols." It was our system. They didn't know it was mine, of course. To them, we were just Orion Shelf Works, a mysterious new player with a shockingly effective platform. But it was working. This wasn't a flashy demo or a slick marketing deck. This was a real-world application, making a real-world difference. Within a week, 2 more small freight companies, both in the perishable goods sector, had reached out, asking for a trial. The tremors were small, but they were beginning to register. At Viron, The response was predictable. Rosie, who still had a discreet backdoor into some of their public analytics dashboards, watched as their system began to show signs of strain. Their once-touted route prediction tool was quietly taken offline for maintenance. Then, the inevitable email was leaked from an anonymous source inside Viron. It was from Connor to his senior leadership team. He was blaming the loss of the midline contract on underperforming junior sales staff and a failure to adequately communicate our value proposition. He was creating scapegoats, as he always did, refusing to acknowledge the cracks appearing in his own kingdom. I sat at my desk, watching the ripples spread, a knot of anticipation tightening in my stomach. This was the part one hadn't prepared for. It was one thing to build in the shadows. It was another to watch the first rays of light begin to expose the rot in the house I had once called home. Grant called, his voice as calm as ever. "The soft launch is proceeding as planned." "I know," I said. "Are you prepared for when the response is no longer soft?" I took a breath. "Yes," I said, hoping it was true. My system didn't just offer a better service. It exposed, by its very existence, the inefficiencies and shortcuts that Viron had built its business on. We weren't just poking a sleeping giant. We were systematically dismantling its bed. In a warehouse outside of Toledo, a shipment of life-saving insulin had just arrived at a hospital, cold, intact, and 3 hours ahead of schedule, its journey tracked to the second. That was my work. That was my truth. And the truth, I was beginning to learn, had a momentum all its own. The official response from Viron arrived in a heavy, cream-colored envelope that felt ominous in my hands. It was from Lello and Grayson, LLP, the notoriously aggressive law firm Viron kept on retainer to silence dissent and enforce NDAs. The 6-page letter was a masterwork of legal intimidation. It was a cease and desist, accusing me of industrial sabotage, misappropriation of proprietary technology, and malicious interference with their business contracts. It claimed that my new logistics system bore a striking and actionable resemblance to confidential intellectual property developed during my time at Viron. The irony was breathtaking. They were accusing me of stealing my own work. Every line of code, every architectural diagram, every innovative concept in RouteNet was born from my mind, developed on my own time, and documented meticulously in notebooks and on personal drives that had never been part of their network. I took the letter to Grant. He read it without a flicker of emotion. "Send it to Morgan," he said simply. Morgan was the head of Wakefield's in-house legal team. She was a woman who spoke in quiet, precise sentences and possessed a mind like a steel trap. She glanced at the letter. "This isn't a lawsuit," she said, her voice calm. "This is a scare tactic. They're trying to bully you into stopping." "Will it work?" I asked, the anxiety in my own voice surprising me. She looked at me over the top of her glasses, a faint, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. "You tell me, Amanda. Are you scared?" We didn't just reply. We launched a counteroffensive. Morgan's team drafted a 24-page legal notice of our own. It wasn't defensive, it was assertive. It detailed Viron's unauthorized use of my intellectual property, the fraudulent attribution of my work, and their breach of the very employment contract they were now trying to weaponize against me. We had proof. Timestamps from my original files. Dated notebook sketches. Slack logs and internal emails where I had proposed the core concepts of RouteNet, only to be ignored or dismissed by Connor. We filed our response not in our local jurisdiction, but in Delaware, where Viron was incorporated and where corporate law was notoriously unforgiving of such transgressions. The message was no longer quiet. It was a clear, legally documented declaration. I was not the thief. I was the creator. They were not dealing with a disgruntled ex-employee. They were dealing with a well-funded, meticulously prepared adversary. That week, the tide began to turn, not just in the legal arena, but in the court of professional opinion. A senior executive at Viron quietly deactivated his LinkedIn profile. An anonymous post appeared on a popular tech industry forum, detailing a culture of executive plagiarism and innovation suppression at the company. And then, I received an email from a young developer I had mentored at Viron. "They told us you stole the RouteNet concept," he wrote. "But after seeing the company's internal response to your legal filing, none of us believe that anymore. Good luck." For the first time since that humiliating dinner, a feeling other than anger or anxiety began to take root in my heart. It was a quiet, steady sense of empowerment. We weren't just defending our work anymore. We were reclaiming the truth. And Connor, in his blind arrogance, had no idea that the most powerful force in the world wasn't a high-powered law firm, but a woman with a clear conscience and a well-documented paper trail. It was a late, rainy Tuesday night. I was immersed in a complex data analysis, the rhythmic patter of rain against my office window a soothing counterpoint to the lines of code on my screen. My personal phone, which I rarely used for anything but calls with my family, suddenly buzzed. The name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. Mark Frell. He was an old friend from Viron, a senior operations manager with a good heart and a deep understanding of the company's inner workings. We had spent more than one late night together in the office, fueled by stale coffee and a shared determination to solve some intractable logistics problem. I hesitated, then answered. Mark. His voice was low, strained. Amanda. They're cutting people. A lot of people. A cold knot formed in my stomach. How bad is it? It's a bloodbath, he said, his voice cracking slightly. 4 departments were eliminated this morning. Just gone. We lost 2 of our biggest contracts this week. Everyone is terrified. And they're saying your name, like you're some kind of ghost haunting the place. I waited for the accusation, for him to blame me for the chaos. But it never came. I wanted to warn you, he said. Be careful. They're not just scared anymore. They're desperate. He hung up before I could reply. I sat in the darkness of my office, the city lights blurred by the rain on the windowpane. People I had hired, people I had mentored, people whose families I knew, were losing their jobs. Because of a chain of events I had set in motion. The weight of it settled on my shoulders, heavy and cold. Had I gone too far? Was my personal quest for vindication worth the collateral damage? The question gnawed at me until Rosie sent me a link to a podcast, with no comment. It was one of a new breed of aggressive business podcasts, hosted by 2 self-proclaimed disruptors. Their guest was Connor Maddox. He looked tired, the confident swagger replaced by a tight, brittle defensiveness. But his words were the same. When the host asked about the recent layoffs and contract losses, Connor didn't miss a beat. We're shedding our toxic legacy culture, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. We had to remove some deadweight. People who were resistant to change, who thought their seniority made them irreplaceable. The future of this industry has no room for dinosaurs. I paused the recording. The doubt, the guilt, the questions that had been plaguing me, all evaporated in the heat of a sudden, clarifying anger. He hadn't learned a thing. He was still spinning the same narrative, blaming the very people who had propped up his failing leadership for years. I looked around my quiet office, at the glowing monitors displaying the elegant, efficient system we had built. Our platform was now operating in 6 states, with 3 more slated for launch. Every successful delivery, every satisfied client, was a testament to the work he had tried to bury. I opened a fresh page in my notebook and wrote 2 words at the top, finish it. This was no longer about revenge. This was about accountability. It was about creating a new standard, one built on competence and integrity, not on blame and buzzwords. Connor had made his choice, and his choice was to burn down his own house to keep warm. My choice was to build a better one next door. The final act began not with a bang, but with a quiet email. The subject line read, regarding systemic irregularities at Viron Logistics. The sender was an investigative journalist named Julia Hahn, a woman with a formidable reputation for dismantling corporate corruption with the quiet precision of a bomb disposal expert. Ms. Lewis, her email began, I have received a significant cache of internal documents from a source within Viron. They suggest a pattern of manipulated performance metrics, suppressed audit failures, and a culture of executive retaliation. Your name appears frequently in these documents. I believe you may be able to provide critical context. I would like to speak with you on or off the record. I am not interested in the drama. I am interested in the data. Half an hour later, we were on an encrypted video call. Julia was direct, her questions sharp and incisive. Can you confirm that Connor Maddox directed his team to alter shipment performance data ahead of quarterly investor calls? Yes, I said. I can confirm that. They disabled the live data dashboards I built and replaced them with static spreadsheets that could be manually edited. She nodded, her expression unreadable. And do you have documentation to support this? I have the original source code, timestamped backups, and the server logs showing when the live dashboards were taken offline, I said. I uploaded a secure, encrypted folder to our chat. I had labeled it, simply, the truth. We spoke for over an hour. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't editorialize. I just walked her through the data, explaining the significance of each discrepancy, each altered report, each suppressed failure. I laid out the story of what I had built, what they had tried to bury, and how their own system was failing under the weight of their deceptions. 5 days later, her article was published. It was a methodical, damning exposé titled, "The Ghost in the Machine: How Viron Logistics Gamed Its Metrics and Betrayed Its Clients." It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, filled with screenshots of altered reports, damning quotes from anonymous insiders, and a clear, undeniable timeline of deceit. But the most powerful element was a 3-minute audio clip embedded in the middle of the article. It was my voice, calm and measured. "I didn't sabotage Viron," I said. Their system was sabotaged from within, by a leadership that valued perception over performance. I simply built an alternative based on the truth. The market is now choosing which it prefers. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Viron's stock was halted after a 17% drop in a single morning. 3 board members issued a public call for an independent investigation into leadership conduct and data integrity. Connor's name was suddenly synonymous with corporate fraud. I didn't celebrate. I didn't watch the news reports with a sense of triumph. I went back to my office and continued to work, onboarding a new client, a small family-owned farm that needed to ship its organic produce across 3 states. The silence from Connor's camp was absolute. It was the silence of a kingdom that had finally, irrevocably, fallen. The denouement came on a Wednesday afternoon. Viron was attempting to launch a major software update, a desperate move to prove they were still capable of innovation. Connor, in a final act of hubris, had dubbed it RouteNet 2.0. The system crashed within an hour. A cascade of failures rippled through their network. A driver in Georgia posted a viral TikTok video showing his refrigerated truck's temperature display reading -3 degrees Fahrenheit, while the Viron app insisted it was a balmy +12 degrees Fahrenheit. "My lettuce is about to become a science experiment," he deadpanned to his phone. The next morning, 3 of Viron's largest remaining clients terminated their contracts and, within hours, signed with us. We didn't issue a press release. We didn't need to. The message was clear. That afternoon, Bloomberg News reported that Connor Maddox had been removed from his role as CEO, effective immediately. His corporate biography was scrubbed from the company website. His LinkedIn profile vanished. He was gone. Grant called me. He didn't say congratulations. He simply said, "We're holding a press conference next week to announce our national expansion. You'll be leading it." "My name will be on the announcement?" I asked, the question feeling foreign on my tongue after so long in the shadows. "Your name," he said, "will be on the building." The press conference was held in a simple, elegant ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I walked in alone, wearing a dark blue dress that felt like a quiet statement of intent. My new title was on the lanyard around my neck, Chief Technology Officer. Grant spoke first, then he introduced me, not with hyperbole, but with a simple, powerful acknowledgement. "I would like to introduce the architect of our system," he said. "The mind behind the network. The person who proved that integrity is the most disruptive technology of all. Amanda Lewis." I walked to the podium, the applause a warm, rolling wave. I looked out at the sea of faces, journalists, investors, industry colleagues. "A little over a year ago," I began, my voice steady. "I was told I was incompetent. That I was deadweight. That my ideas were obsolete." A hush fell over the room. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back with words. I went to work. I built the system I had always believed in. And I let the results speak for themselves. A journalist in the front row called out, "Was it all worth it, Ms. Lewis?" I allowed myself a small, real smile. "All I did," I said, "was prove them wrong." The victory wasn't in the applause that followed. It was in the quiet satisfaction of the work itself. It was in knowing that a truck full of medicine was arriving safely, that a small farm's produce would reach the market fresh, that a system built on truth could not only survive, but thrive. Later that night, I received a single, anonymous text message on my personal phone. "I saw the press conference. Well done. You built a better house. I didn't know who it was from. Maybe it was Mark. Maybe it was the young developer. Maybe I thought it was even Connor, a final, cryptic admission from the ruins of his career. It didn't matter. I deleted the message. I had spent a year listening to the noise of the past. Now all I wanted to hear was the quiet, steady hum of the future I was building.